Welcome to this edition of Lancaster Perspective. I'm Mike Miller. Thanks for joining me today. My special guest, longtime friend and executive director of the Lighthouse, Susan Nixon Stoughton. How you doing?
I'm fabulous. How are you?
Fresh off a grandparents' day, I understand.
Skimming a rinky dinky dink. It's stuck in my head. Yes, yes.
This was, which one was this for?
Mount Pleasant.
Mount Pleasant.
Yes, and our oldest granddaughter, Cass.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she enjoyed you being there. And
She did. She had 4 of her fan clubs there. She's very blessed and has a lot of grandparents and great-grandparents. So 4 of her fan club were there and, cheering her on.
Yeah. That's fantastic. That's
Yeah.
super. So actually, you went Grandparents' Day, and then you just came off a high for the University of Belmont and basketball.
NCAA, baby. I was able to experience that, yes. It's Go Bruins.
Yep.
Very proud. My nephew was a redshirt freshman this season, and what a great year to decide that,
Sure.
it all worked out, and, I guess the stars aligned, and it was a great run.
And that redshirt freshman is 6'7", is that right?
He's 6'11".
6'11". I missed
Come
it.
on.
I knew he was big.
Yes, yeah, he had a phenomenal season. That first year in the weight room truly paid off. He was the OVC Freshman Player of the Year.
Wow.
He had so many accolades that even his mother was unaware until she attended their wrap-up banquet at Belmont a couple of weeks ago. And she called me and she's like, so you'll never guess. And it was just stuff that, but that's not why he does it. So it wasn't important for him to alert the media that he received these accolades.
Right.
So, yes.
Well, that's fantastic. So it's been a busy time for you.
It really has. You think of starting at the Lighthouse 9 months ago, basketball season coming around, and when he played at St. Charles, we didn't miss, and so it was hard to. ESPN became my new favorite channel when we couldn't be there, but a couple of times it was a lot of fun to hop on a plane Thursday morning and come back Friday so we could see a Thursday night game, and he's very, very appreciative when folks show up to cheer him on. So very
great.
proud.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Well, I know with all that going on and taking on the Lighthouse responsibilities, that's take a deep breath and tell us a little bit about what's happening.
Well, I think I can sum it up best by I had a donor in to tour the shelter recently, and she pretty well summed it up by stating, Susan, you've taken on a monumental task. So there's a lot that we have started correcting, a lot more that needs to be corrected, but I've got a fabulous team. They fight every day to make sure that we carry on what we need to do.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, Mike, if a man, woman, or child needs us, there's going to be somebody at the other end of that phone that can help them.
Wow. That's talk a little bit about the unit itself, the house itself. How many people?
So to start, to lay the foundation so that people understand why we're now out there requesting financial support. The shelter is in a home that was built in 1900. So we are in a home that is 119 years old. If I just had to have a budget just to take care of the maintenance concerns, it would probably roll the eyes back of some folks to realize that, when you don't have to look up your plumber or your electrician's phone number, there's a lot of calls there. So basically what we have are 6 individual units within the shelter, which is why we're able to also serve men, and many shelters cannot because they're more of an open space, so therefore, they wouldn't have the segregation for privacy. So we have basically 18 beds, but if we have parents in, or a mom or a dad in with a very small child, we have room for 3 porta cribs. So basically at that point in time, we can push it up to 21. We have had adults there on their own. Since I've been there, we've had a man in. Most of the time, it's the last place a man wants to end up is in a shelter. But in this case, being released from the medical center, he needed a place to go until family could come and pick him up, and it just took a couple of days.
What's the average stay for people?
our average length of stay is right around a month.
Okay.
But I can tell you that because of the lack of affordable housing in Lancaster and Fairfield County, we can have people in the shelter for 4 or 5 months, because if we release them without making sure that, they have permanent housing, their likelihood of returning to the abuser is much higher. So we can have somebody there as short as overnight, as long as several months. Since I've been there, our youngest client, it was a mother who had just given birth via C-section from several counties away, and the hospital notified us and said, look, the abuser will never expect her to be released between 11 p and 1 a, and we have somebody who will drive her several counties away, but we need to ensure her safety and that of her child. So we did an intake between 1 and 1:30 in the morning to make sure that we could protect she and her newborn.
Wow.
The oldest client that we've had in the 9 months that I've been there was 81, I believe, was her age. We have people who come with no children. We have other people who come and have had as many as 7.
Now, for my own, do people just call you and say this, or do they come to the house? Do they?
We need everybody to go through the crisis line.
Okay.
Because there seems to be some confusion out there that we're also not only a domestic violence shelter, but a homeless shelter. So we have to truly sort through. And if you were to call and tell me that you were abused, and we asked you the last time you were abused and you said December, you're not in immediate need.
Right.
We will help you with referrals. We will do everything that we can, but we want to make sure that we are there for the people who the abuse has just recently happened, and do everything that we can to protect them from that reoccurring.
That's because you mentioned men and women both. Is it domestic violence? Are there any other attributes that you would take care of besides?
Shockingly, so I'm the naive girl from Bremen, Ohio. Since I've been there, we have had 2 women who have been able to escape human trafficking.
Oh.
And I wasn't prepared for it. But people say, well, how does human trafficking end up at a domestic violence shelter? Their paths are very, very similar, because in both cases, it is rooted in control. So if a woman calls, and many times it's a hospital who will notify us, because they have somebody who has been able to escape that situation. They, first of all, are very scared, because if their trafficker finds them, obviously they're in trouble. So the hospital tries to move them to secure locations, but tries to get them away from where the trafficker has presented themselves. Because certainly, let's say they have presented themselves to a hospital someplace in Columbus, that trafficker is someplace in that general area. So although we do receive funding from Fairfield County, and we always save a couple of beds when we're near capacity for Fairfield County residents, other counties treat us the exact same way. If we receive a call and we know that bringing them to shelter, we can't protect them, we have all the cameras and all the alarm systems in the world, but if we know that situation is as critical as it is, we'll call a neighboring shelter and we'll ask if we can move them. That way we are better able to protect those families.
Right. You mentioned earlier that someone came in from a couple counties away. I'm guessing the relationship and the things you've developed already with other counties is making this stronger for everyone.
We do absolutely everything we can to make sure that if we're helping you, that you're going to be there to help us. I have reached out to a couple of counties in the time that I've been here, and we have laid the groundwork to say, look, there are times, and we're all human, that if there is a client that perhaps, may have more issues than a shelter is prepared to handle, the one thing that the Lighthouse won't do is we won't dump a client onto another shelter. We will be very honest and let them know it would be in the best interest that we are able to move them on. But in cases where it truly comes down to protecting their safety, if they have beds open, they transfer that client.
And you're open 24/7. What do people need to help you with? What do you need? I mean, living in an unlimited budget world and all those things, but what is it right now that people can help the Lighthouse with?
It's, people are very generous to us to donate things. But we are a shelter that was built in 1900, so our storage is very, very limited. When we need specific items, we post it on social media to let the community
Okay.
know, hey, right now we need this or we need that. We are heading into yard sale season, and many times people will call us after they've had their sale and want to bring everything left over to us. We can't permit that. Part of the reason is I spend a minimum of $50 a week to make sure that we keep that shelter bed bug free. And none of us want to think that we have bed bugs,
Right.
but fact of the matter is they're everywhere. And any time that I have to flip the switch to run my bed bug shed, it's 3 hours worth of power that then, certainly
Right.
that adds to a utility bill. We also no longer accept clothing. Anybody who calls and they want to donate clothing, we ask them to please make arrangements with St. Peter's Lutheran Church at the intersection of Mulberry and Broad Street, because they allow us to send our clients over to take as much as we need, and there's never
Wow.
a charge. If people have other items that they're looking to donate, we look at, many times we'll forward them to Maywood Mission, because if we call them with a need, they don't charge us what the store's going price is. They make sure that we're good to them, they're good to us. So it's just a way that, what we don't want to do is get into a situation where our clients are already struggling to secure permanent housing, and then they're now required to go out and buy things to try to
Right.
set up that
Right.
permanent housing.
Right. So if I'm listening, you need some type of housing. You need something new or
Well,
remodeled or
so basically, it would be, obviously financial gifts truly are where we are right
which are
now.
tax deductible.
They are, but it's hard because many times somebody says, well, I know how to do this and I can help. We have to be very careful because of background checks, and we can't just throw the doors open and let people in off the street, because all day long I have to protect who's inside the shelter. And even when we call the police department, if I call them, I open the door, I let them into the shelter. If somebody shows up to the shelter, a police officer or a sheriff's deputy to serve a warrant,
Sure.
I cannot confirm or deny that a client's there, because we are considered a safe haven. And, you want to think that my father is a retired police officer, so I definitely grew up with a great deal of respect for law enforcement. It's one of the hardest things I've had to learn is to say that I can't confirm or deny.
Sure.
But the flip side of that, I remember having a conversation with a wonderful sheriff's deputy who came to serve a warrant. And he said, it just seems like you guys should tell us if they're there. And I had to explain to him that even though it's hard to understand in their world, we protect
Sure,
law
yeah.
enforcement's wives.
Right.
So anybody could show up that's wearing a badge and say they have an official piece of paper, and they could be trying to find out if their buddy's wife is there. It was like a light bulb moment for
yeah.
him, and he realized, I get it. So it's just, it's not always the easiest things to do.
Right, sure.
And no 2 days in the 9 months that I've been there, no 2 days have been the same. But at the end of the day, we have protected the adults and their children that walk through those doors.
Wow.
And I'm only aware of, in 9 months, one person going back to her abuser. I'm only aware. It's not to say that maybe they don't get into another abusive relationship, because many times it's very cyclical, that's all they know. But one.
If someone has an issue, they need a number they can call. Is there something?
Yes.
What's the best thing to do?
The crisis line is 740-687-4423. And that's how you would certainly go through a crisis call if you need shelter. But there's a whole nother world of what we do. The Lighthouse employs 4 court advocates. And those
Okay.
court advocates, I always tell the story that if my husband were to ever fall and bump his head and think the right thing to do is to take a swing at me, I wouldn't have to call the shelter and ask for a place to stay because my parents are both still living. I have 2 sisters and a brother, and I know I could find a place to go.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the clients that we have come through shelter, one of 2 things have happened. Either their families have been there for them for far too long and their families have given up because they just keep
Sure.
going back to the abuser, or they don't have any family close. But me, on the other hand, where I have another place to go, I reach out to a court advocate and I'm able to file a temporary protection order. It would cost me nothing. And if my court advocate, I'll use one name and let's say it's Joan.
Okay.
Joan actually does all the paperwork. She gets it scheduled through the courts so that it can go before a judge or a magistrate for the hearing. Any process that I would go through to secure that court order, then Joan calls me to tell me that in fact it has been served. He has received that restraining order. And if I have to go back in front of the judge or the magistrate,
Mm-hmm.
she is with me the
Okay,
entire
okay.
time. I am never out there by myself. And we find that many men, they speak more freely to women than they do law enforcement, and sometimes freeze when they get in front of the bench. So there's a whole nother line of service that we provide through the Lighthouse that, many people wouldn't be aware of. They think we're just a shelter.
Continuing that, if someone suspects a neighbor or somebody, they call in, do they have to identify themselves? Do they,
So
like that, a neighbor 3 houses up, I think she's being abused.
So it's really hard. We can't do a crisis call with anybody but the client. But we can give them tips on what to do to talk to that person, to try to ensure their safety. And anytime that somebody calls administration's phone, but they truly need a crisis call worker, my first question to them, are you in a safe place now?
Okay.
And, this number that you're giving me, for how much longer, do you have before the abuser returns?
Right.
Because I don't want a crisis call worker to call them back and the abuser to be there. So we try to do everything we can to protect the client once they do call.
Is there an average age that you see of, I mean, is it younger women, older women? I mean,
I would say the bulk of who we see are no older than 35. We do have a lot of people, the 35 to 50s, but the bulk of who we see are, I would say, 35 and under.
one of the questions I had, someone asked me, is it always men against women, or is it
No.
women against women?
Because let's face it, LGBTQ, and but we can help anyone. So it is men who abuse men. It's women who abuse women. So the bulk of the cases is men against women. But it's not to say we've had a case where the charges were filed against the wife, not the husband. She was the aggressor. So to say that, everything is pretty generic, the bulk of what we see is men against women. But in 9 months, I have maybe not witnessed, but I've seen and heard a lot.
If people wanted you to come out and talk to community groups, are you available to do that?
Anytime. And the administration line is 740-689-2558. And all folks would have to do would be to call in. And I don't have administrative help right now. So if you get the voicemail message, no, I'm probably on another line or out talking to another group. But I do call everybody back.
Absolutely.
Yes.
When you went into this, after coming from the United Way, did you expect, or was this like, oh my golly? I mean, I've known you long enough, and I just think this was something you just didn't, when you got in, there were so many things for you to do.
Overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And still am 9 months later. If you ask me how long I've been there, I know by a calendar. But if you ask me how long it feels, because I don't feel like I've gotten enough accomplished, I feel like I've been there about 3 months. But as a very, very smart woman here in town told me yesterday, this didn't get into the shape that it is overnight,
Right.
and you're not going to be able to fix it overnight. My husband would tell you that I'm a very, very impatient person and I like to get things done now. So this truly has been a test of patience with me. But, every day, you do a little bit more, and it truly does make a difference to the lives of those that need us most.
Talk a little bit about human trafficking, because Ohio, I just saw a stat, Ohio leads the nation.
Fourth.
Okay.
Fourth in the nation. And that is thank you to great roads and all that infrastructure, and they head in every direction. But the other reason that Ohio ranks fourth is because of where we are geographically to Canada, and there's a lot of child trafficking there.
Wow.
So as far as trafficking goes, it can be any number of reasons how it gets started. It could be because perhaps somebody had a drug problem. A trafficker realized that and started dealing drugs to that person, and then made that person know that they owed them a debt. And that's how their life got started. There are also those issues of, and one that I'm very familiar with, her father passed away and her aunt sold her at 14.
Oh, my.
So to full circle, was I prepared for this? Who could be? And I always say that I know over time I will toughen up a bit, but I don't want to get those, those hard edges, because I think that then I would become ineffective to folks. And although I don't work with the clients one-on-one day in and day out, I know who they are. I know that their kids have spelling tests on Friday mornings. You have those things. And honestly, Mike, at the end of a long day, it might be 8 or 8:15 and all I want to do is go home.
Sure.
When I've had a particularly long day, for no particular reason, I will go to the shelter because I just need to see either one of the clients or one of their children to know, okay, I'll be back up and at it again tomorrow. But without the support of an incredible staff, none of this would be what it is now.
We just have a few minutes left. The time has flown by. Information, phone number again, website, I don't know. The other
Yes.
thing that someone asked me, and I know that I said I doubt they do this, but do you ever have people come in and just see the facilities? Like an open house, I guess?
No.
Okay.
No, we
I
have
did-
to
I told
protect
them
the
no.
clients that are
Yeah,
inside.
I told them no.
However, when I have a donor who does want to tour, I have to have some notice so I can make sure that, those survivors that are in shelter have a chance to either disappear or that they're okay being seen. And that's just to protect,
Sure,
to
yeah.
protect the clients.
Yeah.
But as far as, anybody who may know somebody that they feel is in danger, if they can just slip them the number of 740-687-4423, that will immediately hook them up with a crisis call that we would take care of. Anybody that may be interested in making a contribution to the Lighthouse, they can do that even with a credit card over the phone, and they could call 740-689-2558. Same number if anybody would like me to come out and speak to their group.
Fantastic. We appreciate you coming in. You have done a heck of a job. I
Thank
know that going into that, there was kind of, well, let's see what happens. But we just appreciate you coming in. We'll get you back on once
Thank you.
Some other things happen. But we appreciate everything you do and all the time you put in. And I know I've called her late at night and she's still there. So
Yeah.
we appreciate everything, so we really do.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to tell a little bit about our story.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Lancaster Perspective. I'm Mike Miller, and remember, till we meet again, let's make a difference.